Well, the last recording was called Secularity. With good reason. It didn't bring God into the picture at all. It didn't bring what we call the spiritual into mind, although it did sort of infer something about ethics, in that we felt exploitation and the achievement of happiness, or the lack of it, is something to do with good and bad. Well, it had, therefore, a lack of what we might call humanitas, which is not simply a mechanical intelligence capability in pursuit of power, but an understanding of personhood, self, and relationship to needs, nourishment and security. The whole picture and understanding and observation missed out that which couldn't be physically observed. The thoughts of these individuals, how they see their being and their situation of life. And when we introduce that into the picture, in very non-emotive terms, I mean the spiritual, to be defined as that which is going on, which is not tangible, physical, that affects the senses, but greatly preoccupies the domain of the mind and the thoughts. A great development from, we think, the experience of living that we have as individuals now, hopes and expectations clustered around the concept of self and individuality, of purpose. Of course, purpose was in the struggle of power elites and communities to find ways of securing nourishment and protection. But this now is about that side of the thinking person that is preoccupied with the thinking and the scheming, if you like, and the wants, desires, imaginations and hopes, the intangible aspect of welfare that we might refer to as thoughts, and thoughts of happiness and fears and hopes, values, appreciation. And it's that which is preoccupying the individual, greatly determining his actions in his situation. In other words, the mental, the psychological, which is very intangible, which I'm loosely referring to as spiritual, starts to become major if we're to understand what's going on and even perhaps why. So we think of areas of things like psychology and sociology and politics and concepts like learning and wisdom and understanding and values like integrity, wisdom, there's a whole vast complex of the intangible now to be understood that may well be both in origin and continuing subject to the environment, situation, the limits of the body and the needs of the body like nourishment and protection, but there's a whole life of the actors now that is to be considered if we're to really understand what's going on, the consequence and the drive. Of the societies we're looking at. In other words, you can't just describe a nation in terms of its locality, its number of people, and if you like, its level of technology. You need something else, an understanding of the intangibles. That are of major importance in how things are turning out. In other words, you need to know something about the culture, the religions, the philosophy, the perceived history, historicity probably, and so on, of a nation, to see how they are so different and how they interact with each other. And this side of things is not just on some sort of academic objective observation of such. We are all, as individuals, doing it. We all have this side to ourselves which is not physical, it's mental. It's our hopes, our desires, our imagination, our expectation, our history, our memories, our reactions. And they are the very substance of what we think of as good and bad, because they're evaluations. Evaluations are not physical. They're of the physical very often, but they're also of the mental and of the situation, my perceived subjection to elites or power situations, inequalities and so on, my hopes, my fears, degree to which I can be manipulated or independent, my valuing of such being dependent or independent and so on, the sort of prosperity I'm seeking, my perception of what my needs are. They are all absolutely major, these things, as regards our overall contentment and activity. Each is then wrestling with his fears and hopes and perceptions and thinking much, and it's the thinking that's counting for him, what he's thinking. And can I in some sense take control of this thinking, or is it just happening to me, stimulated by the environment around? Is there a true freedom, a choice of an independence that can take command of this state of the intangibles, the mind and the hopes and so on? And religion is much relevant to such. Its schools and marshals the intangible into a coherence that is ideally more ideal, better, less destructive, more creative, happier, the things we value. It starts to identify which intangibles we value most: joy, peace, happiness, hope, assurance, wisdom, understanding. We're starting to get a value system, and it's a value system that may be personified in those around us. We admire and love some people, fear and hate others. And we know that it's our view of them that we're reacting to. Sure, our view of them is being determined by something physical outside, but not just that. It's also determined by our view of them because of who we are. And we adjust who we are to cope better with the external problem. We might become very submissive, say, in a Chinese type situation, or very competitive, say, as in an American situation, or very communal, as in, say, a South American town festival type situation. So we seek for a better view, a view that will be more satisfactory. We're seeking some sort of utopian idea, the ideal family, community, psychology, situation, attitude, values. We personify what we value and admire that and want to trust in anything that would embody such. We imagine the advantages of a super being beyond the constraints of the physical, that's able to choose these values perfectly. And these values include, of course, loving kindness to us, that favour us. So we visualize a super being that's wonderful and loving and kind and very powerful, all powerful. And really that's our ideal, our hope, our desire. It is what we value. We can't not desire it. It's imperative. It's not so much imperative as in imposed, but inevitable. The concept of God is inevitable. That's the power of God, that his existence cannot be avoided. It is going to be desired by such a developed creature who has come to develop his non-material side, who he is. And who he hopes to be, an eternal being, an eternal happy being, perhaps an eternal communal being, although people like the Hindu to some extent, but the Buddhist more so, visualize an eternal, lonely, isolated being, not a communal heaven, but a oneness of simply being. which from your background may appear extremely lonely, the epitome of what you don't want. Although presumably if you want it and it's ideal, then I suppose that would be good, but perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps God wanted family. And perhaps you have an individualism that would prefer a God that wanted family. So that's what you value. So that's the only God you can love. So we love our God until we find what we attributed to him doesn't quite bring in the goods. And then we adjust our values accordingly, and we have a new God that we love. One that brings perhaps harmony, not just wealth. And then one that brings harmony to all, not just some. We quickly home and hone. They're suspiciously similar, those two words, to hone into and to home into, and we use them, I think, interchangeably. We're not clear which word we're using at times. Homes in onto a common view of God, because, of course, we have faced common physical problems. We need nourishment, protection, community, perhaps, power over our resources to achieve such. We strike up a commonality of God that also implies community, because we have the same views, hopefully not competitive but supportive of each other, communal in fact, family. And we may have experienced the fact that our families were not ideal and could be. So we have an idea of the ideal family. The concept of God in developed man is inevitable. Then you say, but hang on, our most advanced example of man is it's secular, doesn't have a God. It's materialistic. Yes, he seems to be alienated by his technology, and his technology has generated a particular view, a highly discounting view of the immaterial side of its nature. It's as if he's left it in poverty. His science has all been attached to the physical and material, gadgets and so forth, and structures, instead of also applying his creativeness and analytical ability and understanding to his intangible side, the nature of happiness and will and purpose and concepts of self and other, and how best they should be related. In other words, he should have applied his wonderful his evaluative analytical abilities to his human side, humanitas, thought, values, goals, culture. We've made steps in that direction. I mean, the new social sciences are of that. economics was an obvious one. It sort of developed from finance and resource needs and so on. And politics, which clearly was trying to analyse what's going on in our power structures. What is power? It's a bit nebulous, but we're trying to handle it, define it in some way, that we can come to a better relationship with all these things, whether it's our allocation of resources or solutions to discord politically, or the way our society ticks sociologically. So there's been an attempt to try and shift into what we call social sciences, psychology, and so forth. But we've still left out, and I think this is Jason Georgiani's understanding of things, and it's revealing that we've become one-sided, alienated from who we are by focusing on the material only, not on the humanitas side of ourselves. And that is impoverished in its development, our understanding of it and control of it, whereas we should have built on our religions, not isolated them to ossify and turn to stone. That really is not much use to us. We should have developed and understood and found ways of developing the contribution, if you like, the appreciation of the material by the self, the psychological, human, spiritual side of the man. Else we will not understand why or where the physical developments technology is going. In other words, it's not serving us without being equally sophisticated in analysing what we are and who we are, how we tick mentally and purposefully, happily, motivationally. The fabric of community and, if you like, its importance to man, what the ideal community really is. And certainly politics and sociology and that and psychology are making steps towards it. But it's as if they can't keep up with the strides in physical technology and communication and mechanical thinking ability of the computer, the speed with which it can perform certain elementary rational tasks. You know, does the computer become the ideal slave in that we don't have to worry about its welfare? Or do we actually have to worry about our welfare in relation to the computer and our communicative technology, our media and so on? We are one-sided, and that one-sidedness might be the real next cataclysm to face this society on its world scale. Thank you, Dad. And thank you, Jason, for coming across that and putting it over. Quite something. Funny enough, he doesn't strike me as a spiritual person. More like a patriotic person who loves Persia in a way, in that sort of trivial characterization of him. Or a person who's on the fringe of, say, New York, that sort of culture. But with indeed a great poverty of the humanitas needs of God in our life. That God is not just an anachronism that has to now be taken into account with the modern technology. But is the living part of the rescue and solution to all humanity's development problems and being, in a way that technology clearly isn't, and in fact in some ways is just going to be our destruction unless we, well, very simply speaking, have God in the picture. There's something about the human being that cannot be human without perfecting its intangible character. And that sounds very much like the domain of the spiritual, doesn't it? What we used to call the religious, but that got a bad name with its ossification. It's turned to stone. Whereas we want a living, vibrant, wonderful realization of the intangible nature of mankind. I think it's something like that.
Thank you, Dad.